Imagine the deepest darkness you have ever known. Not a dark bedroom, with its gray shapes and the glow of a streetlight under the door. A real dark. The dark at the bottom of a cave, hundreds of meters underground, where no light has ever reached and no light ever will. A dark so complete that your eyes, straining, invent colors that are not there. Now put a single small flame in your hand. A wick of moss floating in a stone bowl of animal fat, throwing a weak, trembling orange light just far enough to see the wet rock in front of your face. And now, walk. Squeeze through a gap barely wider than your shoulders. Crawl on your belly through a tunnel of cold stone. Wade through black water. Go deeper and deeper and deeper into the belly of the earth, until you are further from the sun than you have ever been in your life. And then you lift your little flame to the wall. And the wall is alive. Horses, a whole herd of them, galloping across the stone, manes flying, a pride of lions, hunting, rhinos locking horns, a great black bull 3 meters long, bison, deer, mammoths, bears, painted in red and black and yellow, so full of movement they seem to breathe in the flickering light. You are standing in a cathedral of animals, in the deepest dark, and every one of them was painted here by a human being, a person with your hands, your eyes, your mind, tens of thousands of years ago. So here's the question, waiting for you in the dark. Why? Why did ancient humans crawl into the terrifying black heart of the earth by the light of a single flame and cover the walls with the most beautiful paintings the world had yet seen? What could possibly be worth that? This is the story of the first art. The moment our ancestors picked up a lump of colored earth and made a mark that meant something, and in doing so, quietly, in the dark, became something new. Became us. Let's begin with the finding of them, because for most of human history, these paintings sat in the blackness, unseen, waiting. In 1940, in the south of France, 4 teenage boys went looking for a lost dog and a rumored tunnel, and instead fell into a hole in the ground. They lit a lamp, and they found themselves standing inside Lascaux, a cave roaring with hundreds of painted animals, 17,000 years old, the colors still glowing as if they had been finished that morning. The boys had stumbled into one of the greatest art galleries on earth, and it had been sealed in the dark since before farming, before writing, before the pyramids, before almost everything. And Lascaux was not alone. In a cave called Altamira, in Spain, the paintings were spotted not by a scholar, but by a little girl, the young daughter of the man digging there, who wandered off, looked up, and cried out that the ceiling was covered in bulls. Her father found a ceiling crowded with bison, so lifelike, so skillfully shaded, that when it was first shown to the experts of the day, they refused to believe it. No primitive caveman, they insisted, could have made something this good. It had to be a hoax, they said. And they hounded the man who found it as a liar until the day he died. They were wrong. They were just looking at the work of an artist as gifted as any who has ever lived, who happened to have been born 14,000 years before them. And in 1994, in another part of France, explorers dropped into the Chauvet cave and found lions and rhinos and horses painted with such confidence, such life, that they date back an astonishing 32,000 years or more. The oldest were not the clumsiest. Right from the beginning, humans were masters. And for a long time, we thought this was a European story, that art was born in these Ice Age caves in France and Spain. We were wrong about that too, because on the other side of the planet, in the caves of an island in Indonesia, explorers found something even older. A painting of a wild pig, a warty Sulawesi hog, sprayed onto the rock at least 45,000 years ago. The oldest picture of a real thing that we have ever found anywhere on Earth. On a nearby wall, there is a hunting scene older still by some counts, with tiny human-like figures, some part animal, chasing wild buffalo. So the urge to paint did not begin in one clever tribe in France. It shows up, fully formed, on opposite ends of the world at almost the same time, which means our ancestors most likely carried it with them out of Africa, tens of thousands of years earlier. And there is a stranger possibility still. In a few Spanish caves, simple painted symbols and hand stencils have been dated to more than 64,000 years ago, a time before our species had even arrived in Europe. If those dates hold, the only humans who could have made them were Neanderthals, which would mean the impulse to make art is older than us. Not a human invention at all, but something we inherited. So what, exactly, is down there? What did they paint? Overwhelmingly, they painted animals, the great beasts of the Ice Age, drawn again and again. The horse, the bison, the mammoth, the lion, the woolly rhino, the deer, the bear. And they drew them beautifully, capturing the exact toss of a horse's head, the hump of a bison's shoulder, the curl of a mammoth's tusk. These were people who watched animals for a living, who knew every muscle and movement of the creatures they hunted and feared, and it shows in every line. But here is something strange. They almost never painted themselves. In these vast galleries of glorious living animals, human beings are rare, and when they do appear, they are crude. Stick figures, barely there, as if the people were not the point. The animals were the point. And scattered among them are shapes we still cannot read. Rows of dots, grids, ladders, curves, and strange abstract signs that repeat from cave to cave across thousands of miles, almost like the beginnings of a code, a language we will never learn to speak. And then, on the walls, there are the hands. All over the world, in cave after cave, ancient humans left prints of their own hands. Sometimes they pressed a painted palm to the rock, but more often they did something stranger and more haunting. They placed a bare hand flat against the wall, took a mouthful of powdered pigment, and blew, spraying the color around their fingers so that when they lifted the hand away, its exact shape was left behind in a halo of red or black. A perfect silhouette, a negative. The empty space where a living hand once was. And these hands are small and large. Some are clearly the hands of children, pressed to the wall and painted around by an adult holding them steady in the dark. Some are missing fingers, whole fingertips simply gone from the stencil. And we still argue bitterly about why. Was it frostbite in that brutal Ice Age cold? Was it disease? Was it deliberate? Fingers removed in some ritual of grief or sacrifice? Or is the answer gentler and cleverer than any of that? Were they simply folding their fingers down, bending them against the palm to send a signal, to count, to speak a silent language in signs? We do not know. But a whole wall of these hands, large and small, whole and broken, can look like nothing so much as a crowd of people waving at you across the abyss of time. We will come back to those hands, because they may be the most important thing in this entire story. Now, how did they do it? How do you paint a masterpiece by torchlight, deep underground, with nothing? The colors came from the earth itself, red and yellow from ochre, that same rusty iron-rich clay humans have used for 100,000 years. Black from charcoal, or from manganese, a dark mineral ground to powder. They crushed these pigments on stone pallets and mixed them with water or spit or animal fat into a paint. And they applied it every way you can imagine. With their fingers, with pads of moss or fur, with chewed sticks frayed into brushes, by dabbing, by smearing, and by that astonishing mouth spraying that left the hands behind. Some even made the first crayons, lumps of ochre worn to a point. Picture one of them at work. A single artist, alone, deep in a chamber no daylight has ever touched. A stone lamp of burning fat at their feet, its flame bending in the cave's slow breath. The smell of smoke and cold, wet stone. In one hand, a lump of charcoal. On a flat rock, a little pool of red ochre mixed with spit. They lift their eyes to a swelling curve in the wall, and they do not see rock. They see a bison. And with a few sure sweeping strokes, sketched from a lifetime of watching the real thing, they pull it out of the stone. The heavy shoulder, the lowered head, the small wild eye. No one is watching. There is no gallery, no signature, no fame to be won down here in the black. There is only a person and a wall, and the overwhelming need to make the thing they can see in their mind appear on the stone in front of them. That need is one of the oldest things about us, and none of it was easy. Remember where they were. There was no daylight, ever. Every second of that work was done by the moving, smoking light of a torch, or a little stone lamp of burning fat. To reach some of the paintings, artists had to climb or build scaffolding, holes for which are still cut into the walls. They worked in cramped, freezing, pitch-black chambers, breathing smoke, far from help, surrounded by the bones of cave bears. And they did not just scratch out a quick sketch and leave. They planned. They composed. They came back, sometimes over hundreds of years, generation after generation adding to the same sacred walls. This was not a doodle. This was a labor of devotion. Which brings us back to the only question that matters. Why? Nobody knows for certain. No one was there to write it down. But over a century of staring at these walls, we have gathered a handful of powerful ideas. And the truth is probably a weave of several of them. The first idea is magic. The magic of the hunt. In a world where your life depended on killing animals that were bigger, faster, and stronger than you, perhaps painting the beast was a way of gaining power over it. To capture its likeness on the wall was to capture a piece of its spirit. To make the hunt go well, to call the herds back, to master the mammoth in the safety of the dark before facing it in the light. A few of the animals even have marks on them that look like spears or wounds, as if the painting were a rehearsal or a prayer for the kill to come. The second idea is teaching. A cave like this could have been a school. A place to bring the young in the flickering dark and show them the animals they would one day have to hunt and avoid. This is a bison. This is how it charges. This is a lion, fear it. The first classroom, its walls a living textbook of everything a person needed to know to survive. But the third idea is the deepest, and to many the most convincing. Ritual, religion, the spirit world. Think again about where these paintings are. Not at the cave mouth, where people actually lived, in the daylight and the warmth. They are deep inside, in the most remote, most difficult, most frightening chambers, places you would only ever go on purpose, for something that mattered enormously. To many who study them, that says these caves were not galleries. They were temples. And the person who went down into the dark to paint was not just an artist. They may have been a shaman. Someone who entered the earth as if entering the spirit world itself, perhaps in a trance, and brought back visions, painting the things they saw beyond the veil onto the wall between worlds. The deep cave was the doorway. The paintings were what came through. And that idea gets more powerful when you look closely at how the animals were made. Because these artists did something breathtaking. They used the cave itself. A natural bulge in the rock becomes the swelling flank of a bison. A crack becomes a leg. A hollow becomes an eye. They saw animals hiding in the shape of the stone, and they simply drew them out. And then there is the light. These paintings were never meant to be seen the way we see them, flooded with electric floodlights. They were meant to be seen by fire. And by the leap and flicker of a flame, the animals move. A horse drawn with extra legs blurs into a gallop. A bison shudders as if breathing. The shadows shift, and the whole herd seems to stampede across the walls. It may be the oldest movie in the world. Animation, 30,000 years before the cinema. These people were not just painting animals. They were bringing them to life. But to find the single most important thing in these caves, we have to leave the walls and pick up something you can hold in your hand. Because ancient humans did not only paint, they carved. And in the same deep age, from ivory and stone and bone, they made small figures. Some are of women, round and powerful, like the famous little Venus figures found across Europe. But one of them is something else entirely. Something that changes everything. In a cave in Germany, archaeologists found a figure, patiently carved from a mammoth tusk around 40,000 years ago. It stands upright, like a person. It has the body of a human. But its head is the head of a lion. It is called the Lion Man. It was dug up in pieces, hundreds of fragments of ancient ivory, and took decades to puzzle back together before anyone understood what it was. And it is one of the most important objects ever discovered, because a lion-headed man does not exist. It never has. No one ever saw one, because there is no such thing. Experiments have shown that carving it with the stone tools of the day would have taken something like 400 hours of work, months of a person's life, in a world where every hour was needed just to stay alive, poured into a figure of an animal that was never born. Which means that 40,000 years ago, a human being sat in the dark for hundreds of hours, carving with enormous care a creature that lived nowhere but inside their own head. Stop and feel the weight of that, because that is the whole secret. That is the moment. To carve the Lion Man, to paint a horse on a wall, you have to be able to do something no other animal on earth can do. You have to be able to hold in your mind a picture of something that is not in front of you. And then you have to make a second staggering leap. You have to agree and get others to agree that this smear of ochre, this lump of tusk, is that thing. That a shape can stand for something else. That one thing can mean another. And once a mind can do that, once a smear of red can be a horse, and a carved tusk can be a god that never existed, then everything becomes possible. Because that single ability, a thing standing for another thing, is the root of all of it. Of every word in every language, which is just a sound we agree stands for a thing. Of every story ever told. Of money, of religion, of art, of science, of this very sentence entering your mind right now. The cave paintings are not just pretty pictures. They are the fossil of the moment the human imagination switched on. The moment we began to dream while awake and to make our dreams real on the wall. And now, at last, we can come back to the hands. Of everything down there in the dark, the galloping horses, the lions, the impossible Lion Man. It is the simple handprints that reach out and grab people the hardest. And it is not hard to see why. A person, tens of thousands of years ago, went down into the deepest dark, held their hand against the cold stone, and blew red earth around it, leaving the shape of themselves on the wall forever. They were not painting an animal. They were not casting a spell. They were doing the simplest, most human thing there is. They were saying, I am here. I was real. I existed. Remember me. They could not have known who would see it. They could not have dreamed of you. Sitting where you are, in a world of glass and electric light they had no words for. But they left their hand on the wall anyway. A small, defiant flare of a signal fired across 30,000 years of darkness. And here you are, on the other end of it, looking back. In that moment, across all that impossible time, a hand reaches out of the dark toward you, and something in you reaches back. That is what art has always been. From the first blown handprint in a freezing cave, to the song in your headphones, to the film that made you cry, to the doodle in the margin of your notebook. All of it is the same ancient act. One human mind, refusing to stay silent and separate and alone, reaching across the dark to touch another. We have been doing it since before we built a single house. It may be the most human thing we do. It may be the thing that made us human in the first place. The people who painted those caves are long gone, and their names are lost, and their world of mammoths and ice melted away 10,000 years ago. But their hands are still on the wall, still reaching, still saying the oldest sentence our species ever spoke into the dark. I was here. Thanks for watching. If you like the questions most people never stop to ask, subscribe and stick around, because next time we are digging into another strange, forgotten corner of the world of ancient humans.